our environments and our experiences all play a role in literally shaping our brains, like not just the memories that we make and the associations that we have, but they can affect the way we respond to certain things, like threats, for example. And when you don't have people with a diverse array of life experiences in your neuroscience research, you could be missing out on quite a lot. So not just, differences in how your experience might make you respond to one thing versus another, but if you have homogeneous samples, then you may be walking away with findings that don't actually apply to most people.
What's up, everybody? From Nautilus, I'm Brian Gallagher, and you're watching Behind the Scenes. Today I'm speaking with Jackie Rocheleau. Jackie is a science writer and editor interested in neuroscience, public health, and medicine. Her writing has appeared in places like Vox, Forbes, Scientific American, and others. She did an MS in science journalism as well as a BA in neuroscience and psychology at Boston University. Her recent story in Nautilus was Neuroscience Has a Race Problem. Jackie, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, to start off, would you mind summarizing your intellectual and academic background a little bit, as well as your work as a writer?
Sure. So, as an undergrad, I majored in neuroscience and psychology. I was very interested in the brain and how it made us do the things that we do. Um, and I was not really sure what I wanted to do with that because I wasn't super interested in research. But right before I graduated, I learned about that people are science journalists for a career. And so that's how I got into my science journalism program. And in there, I really started exploring more about how neuroscience interacts with society. And that has been one of the overarching themes in my work, or the things that I really like to explore.
Very cool. What drew you into neuroscience and psychology in the first place when you went to college? Why was that the area of science you found yourself interested in?
Well, I was kind of most interested in it because of history, actually. When we learn about, all of the bad things that have happened throughout humanity, it just really made me wonder what makes people do the things that they do, and thought that the best way to get to the root of that would be to learn more about the brain.
Hmm. Would you mind giving us a brief summary of your recent story for our viewers who may not have read it yet?
Yeah, sure. So basically, um, Tamara Parker and Jocelyn Ricard, two young researchers at Yale, they met up and they were noticing and sharing with each other some of the sources of exclusion in neuroimaging. And they realized that this was something that a lot of people were dealing with, but there wasn't a lot of work talking about it. So that was sort of the source of their paper that spurred this story. Um, and the story takes into account how MRI, EEG, and functional near infrared spectroscopy, or FNIRS, how they are built without having in mind all of the people who would use them one day. And so as a result, they don't work as well in people with specific phenotypes. And this has a lot of cascading effects from any clinical findings or clinical implications that stem from this research to then tools that are further developed to be used in neuroscience research, from, like algorithms that analyze neuroimaging data. And then all of that just compounds when it doesn't work as well in certain populations.
Why don't some of the neuroimaging technologies that scientists use work with some populations and not others?
So with EEG, one big thing is that the electrodes really need close contact with the scalp because they record the electric signals that come from active neurons in the brain, and they need really close contact. And so if you have thick or curly or coarse hair, it's not always super easy for EEG technicians to get that close contact that they need. Um, and then with MRI, some larger natural or protective hairstyles, often worn by Black women, don't necessarily fit into the small tube that the patient or research participant will go in to get scanned. And then with skin tone, so FNIRS, there are optodes that send and receive light. It's similar to EEG in that these optodes are close to the scalp, and with darker skin colors, the melanin absorbs more light and it makes for slightly noisier signals.
That's interesting. What are some of the ways researchers are thinking of addressing this issue with people not being able to use these tools, or certain people not being able to, like Black women, being able to have their brains be scanned as effectively as others?
Yeah, so something that one of the people that I spoke with for this, Jasmine Kwasa, brought up was that there are technical solutions like ones that she's working on called the CevoClip, the startup that she's with from researchers at Carnegie Mellon University, Precision Neuroscopics. They're working on developing this clip that can better hold the electrodes against the scalp of people with coarse and curly hair. And if you braid or cornrow the hair in patterns that can accommodate the electrode placement, it can help you get a clearer signal. But she was also saying that just more cultural competency with hair can make a huge difference. So even without doing anything super technical or engineering fixes, researchers can definitely do a lot more to be familiar with this kind of hair type and how to work with it rather than against it. Um, I spoke with someone who's a neurophysiologist in South Africa, and she says that they deal with people, Black people, and their curly, coarse hair all the time. She doesn't ever have any issues getting good signals, and that's just because she's a lot more familiar with it. And she was actually kind of surprised that in the US, this is that big of an issue.
Hmm. What was your impetus or inspiration for writing about neuroimaging and race?
So I can't take full credit for the idea. So I was speaking with another editor at Nautilus, Kristen, about a different story idea, and then she came to me with this paper and asked if I would like to write about something completely different. And I had done some reporting in the past on the different ways that our experiences and environments can shape our brains, and as well as racial disparities in some areas of neuroscience research, particularly psychiatric genomics. And so I was excited to write about this because this kind of brought together those two different pieces in a way that I hadn't really seen any published papers on before. So, in the lens of neuroimaging, and as I looked into it further, there is very little on this problem. So, it was really interesting to be able to get into something that people are only just starting to like really officially look at.
Can you talk a little bit about why it's important for neuroimaging data to be ethically diverse?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, our environments and our experiences all play a role in literally shaping our brains, like not just the memories that we make and associations that we have, but they can affect the way we respond to certain things, like threats, for example. And when you don't have people with a diverse array of life experiences in your neuroscience research, you could be missing out on quite a lot. So, not just, differences in how your experience might make you respond to one thing versus another, but if you have homogeneous samples, then you may be walking away with findings that don't actually apply to most people.
What were some of your first thoughts about how to start writing this story after you had conducted some of the research?
Well, one of my first thoughts, so when Kristen and I were talking about this story, she said it sounded like it could be pretty straightforward. And as I was going along, I was like, yeah, this can be pretty straightforward. And I guess those are a writer's famous last words, because it did not end up being as straightforward as anticipated. And the more that the more sources that I spoke with, I got deeper into just how complicated and pervasive some of these issues are. Um, and yeah.
What are some interesting tidbits or anecdotes or ideas that you came across, but for whatever reason didn't end up making it into the story?
So, one is the idea that um, there are things maybe going on outside of the brain, like high blood pressure, for example, or maybe other medical conditions that could be influencing some of the neuroimaging data that you get. So, with MRI, functional MRI, it measures brain activity by detecting the oxygenation level in the blood in certain regions of the brain. And it's thought that the regions that have this higher blood oxygenation level dependent signal, or the bold signal, are more active. And because it's not just the brain activity that governs your cerebral vasculatory system, it's also things going on elsewhere in your body. It's thought that maybe high blood pressure could influence some of those bold signals. But this isn't yet something that scientists know a ton about. And my understanding is that it's still pretty preliminary, and there's some evidence that it does influence that signal, but they're just not totally clear the degree to which it does that yet.
Hmm. What are some other story ideas that you're working on right now?
Something that I have on the back burner is how climate change is actually affecting the nervous system of animals in the ocean, crabs in particular. So that's something that a researcher who was recently at Brandeis, I believe, that she was working on in her graduate work. Um, and I'm excited to follow up with her and a couple other researchers to see more about what they're seeing about how like warmer waters and the pH levels are influencing the nervous systems of these crabs, and how that can be a sort of bellwether for other things going on in these ecosystems.
That's interesting. All right. To close out, we want to tell our viewers where they can find you online. Do you have a website we can visit or any social channels we can follow?
Yeah, so my website is nobrainersite.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Jackie Rocheleau.
Excellent. Jackie, thanks so much for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you.